I am back from Mexico, and we are here to talk about the NFL Scouting Combine and, in turn, flip that over into free agency, which is coming up here in just a week. There are a lot of things to talk about, including Sam Darnold, what the Vikings are going to do potentially in free agency, what players stood out at the Combine, and the curious case of Garrett Bradbury. What do we do? Let's talk about it. Welcome to the Real Forno Show.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Real Forno Show, hosted by the one and only Tyler Forness. AtoZ Sports sought him out to be their Minnesota Vikings reporter and NFL analyst. And he's a proud contributor over at SKOL North's Purple Daily. Tyler is also the captivating host of The Good, The Bad, and The Hungry on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network, and a founding member of Vikings First and SKOL.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Real Forno Show. I'm your host, Tyler Forness, with me as always. And I got the point wrong. This is what happens when you're in Mexico for a week. Producer Dave, let me tell you, it's good to be back. It's good to have a discussion about the Minnesota Vikings. And man, we're a week away from seeing how this 2025 roster is really going to shape out and how it's going to impact the NFL draft, because there are going to be a lot of things happening. Don't be surprised if there are a lot of things happening on Monday. Monday is going to be the big one. Monday is going to be the day that everybody circles. Why? The Vikings made the majority of their moves on Monday. They brought in Jonathan Gennard. They brought in Andrew Van Ginkel. They brought in Sam Darnold. And I believe they also brought in Blake Cashman, all on day one. Oh, and then Aaron Jones was like an overnight thing. So in the first 24 hours, they pretty much reloaded their entire roster and got it set up for a very successful 2024 season. Now, the season didn't turn out the way we wanted, but not everybody gets to hoist the Vince Lombardi trophy. The Vikings had a very good season. It is what it is. What are they going to do in 2025? And Dave, I think that's the one really, really interesting thing here. What are the Vikings going to do in 2025 during free agency? Because there's a lot of different paths. And we even broke it down a few weeks ago when I did what I called the path of glory, where I laid out what I thought was the most realistic possible path toward a successful offseason. We don't really know what they're going to do. We have inklings. We have guys that they like, guys that they're going to be targeting. But you have to remember two things. One, they have to be interested. And two, they have to pick you, because it's not like you go up to them and start negotiating. This isn't a normal job interview. You have other people fighting for their services. Because other teams are fighting for their services, it makes it a lot harder to be able to bring those guys in. So there's going to be a lot of different things that factor in. Yeah, we want, hey, this guy. Hey, we want that guy. And we want all of them. We have a chance to get all of them, but we won't land all of them, because there are 31 other teams that could also be in the running for their services. It's a very complicated one. Plus, as I adjust my chair and apparently move my entire desk, that's what happens. That's what happens when you have a desk chair on carpet, ladies and gentlemen. But I will say this, and it's something we've talked about a lot, Dave. Just because it's not your ideal path, and it's something I need to remember too, doesn't mean it's a bad path or the wrong path. We all have an ideal scenario that we want to happen. We want this guy. We don't want that guy. I didn't really want Sam Darnold. Well, guess what? He led us to 14 wins. It's okay to eat crow once in a while. But I have faith that this regime is going to do a good job in identifying the right talent and getting them at the right price. They did so last year, and they did a bang-up job. And you know what? It's okay to be wrong sometimes. It's okay.
Because you were already in this show.
What did I do?
You said Monday is the day that they're going to bring these guys in.
Oh, sorry. Let me reframe that, because I'm right, but I'm also wrong. It's the day that they're going to start agreeing to contracts.
They cannot
bring them into the facility until past 3 p.m.
on
next
Wednesday.
But they can agree to the contracts, and that's what I was getting at. But nope, that's fair. I framed it incorrectly. I deserve the crap. But I want to kind of start here. And the one tough part about like my new setup versus my old setup is when I would look straight ahead, I would actually be looking into a screen, but that's not how I do it now. My screens are bloop and bloop, and the camera's right in the middle. So because of that, it looks like every time I look at my screen, it's like I'm not looking at the camera, which I have to get over. But I want to kind of start in the comments. And we'll kind of go this way, and we're going to hit everything that Dave has in kind of the breakdown of the show in the show notes. There's a lot of different things to cover, and I think we're going to be able to do so by kind of just having a little like town hall kind of thing. So if you're in the comments right now, drop your questions, and I'm going to try and get to all of them. If they repeat and I don't get to yours, that's probably why. I think this is an interesting one from Anthony Tollison. Kick Bradbury to the curb ASAP. I actually just finished writing a column about this, and it's going to go up in the morning. The idea of replacing Bradbury is fine. Give me a better option. And a better option has to come with two factors. One, they either have to be better than Bradbury, and it has to make sense what you're getting for the price. Bradbury is an average center. He has his flaws. He has his strengths. They're pretty well defined at this point. My thing with Bradbury is, are you going to be able to find better? And is that better worth the price? Because Bradbury is only $6.064 million in salary cap. That's good for an average center, which is what he is. He's like center like 16 to 20. To me, that's average. And I think that's a fine price. And I think he's a good player. And I don't think that his flaws are as egregious as a lot of the fan base thinks, which is fair. We're okay to disagree there. I think his flaws are there, but they've done a really good job of mitigating those flaws. They've done a really good job of working around them. And are you going to be able to find better this offseason? I'm not talking in period, because I don't think Drew Dalman is better for what you're going to have to pay him. You might have to give this guy an $18 million contract a year. Drew Dalman is Garrett Bradbury with like chocolate coating. It's like taking a strawberry.
Chocolate coating is a lot better graded.
Screw the grades. We're not talking about the grades. I don't want to deal with PFF grades.
Okay, Ryan Kelly from the Colts.
Well, let me get to Dalman first. Dalman is a wide zone center who provides you the same archetype as Bradbury. It would be very easy for him to have the same issues as Garrett Bradbury. So are you willing to pay upwards of triple the price for him? To me, that's a no. I wouldn't even pay double the price for him, because the pass blocking is still a concern. The run blocking might be slightly better, but you're not getting like a road grader. You're not getting like if it was a Creed Humphrey type, who's a great athlete, but he's a big dude who is not going to get bullied in the trenches, I think I'd tend to agree. But you're just getting like Garrett Bradbury with chocolate coating. To me, that's not better. That's not improving your football team. It's actually a hindrance because of the money that's with it. Then you bring up Ryan Kelly. If Ryan Kelly had been healthy the last 2 years, I would be all for it. Ryan Kelly cannot stay healthy. And to me, that is where I have trepidation. How much are you going to have to pay Ryan Kelly? And then can he stay on the field? If he could stay on the field, I'm in. But I have real concerns that he can't. And to me, that's where some of this discussion lies. Because when you have a player like Ryan Kelly, very good football player. I think he's made a few Pro Bowls. He might have an All-Pro. Might have to double check that. But it's not just about finding a better player. They have to, one, be on the field, and two, they have to make sense financially. You give Ryan Kelly like a 1-year, $10 million deal, and I know he's going to be on the field, Okay, you've sold me. I'm in. But history tells us that Kelly might be off the field more than on the field. And to me, that's a major cause for concern. So if you're going to replace him, I would need to feel comfortable that I'm actually going to get that player back. Because look, Bradbury, I'm not defending him saying he deserves to be the long-term guy. I think you need to work on a replacement for him. But in a 1-year sample, which is kind of what we're talking about here, can you tell me that you're going to find an improvement? To me, I haven't been presented with an option that I believe is a true improvement. Because if you have to pay a guy who's going to be better at center, which look, I think Dahlman is a better center than Bradbury. I don't think he's dollar amount so much better that he's worth paying that much money, which in turn makes another part of your team weaker. So you have to do the cost benefit analysis. I don't think he's that kind of player. To me, that's why I'm out. Because I don't think you're getting enough positive for the amount that you'd have to spend and take away from a different position. Like, Bradbury's capable. He's fine. He's not great. I think you need to find a long-term replacement. I just haven't been presented with an option right now that tells us that there is a real upgrade, because it's not just about center. You have to think about it from a salary cap perspective. And I think that's kind of where some of these discussions can be a disconnect. And maybe you disagree with me on that, and I think that's fine. But if you have to pay a guy who's slightly better, triple the money, but you're going to have to take it from somewhere else. One, I don't see the Vikings doing that. Two, I don't see that as smart roster construction. And you may disagree with me, Dave, and I'll give you the floor kind of because I think this is a layered discussion. I really don't see a pathway to improving the center position with a guarantee that it's better from both a cost and an on-field perspective.
I disagree. We have cap space. We can pay and set up contracts so we could replace all three of them and still get a defensive interior tackle and corner, however you want. It's all how Brez works the numbers. We can pay for all of that. And with the cap rising and expected to rise balloon over the next 3 years, I don't see any problem with it. Now, what is too much? Are you overpaying too much? You can make that argument. You know, people were talking about Trey Smith, and I was saying he's probably going to get 22 to 25 million. Well, he just got tagged. And we'll get into that a little bit later. Mm-hmm. But, or at least it was announced they intend to tag him. And then I said, well, go to that second lower tier and get the guys that are going to go for 11 and 13 million and get two of them. Right? You're going to pay a little bit more, but you're covering two bases instead of one. I think you can cover all three bases, i.e., relieving Bradbury of his duties for relatively little. Now, when we talk about Riley, which Darren suggested yesterday, yes, he has an injury history, but it's not like Bradbury's exempt from that. Bradbury's had back issues on and off his whole career. So, and yes, he's older. It would be a temp fix, like taking Zeitler at left guard or something. It'd be a temp fix while Juergens spools up to speed or something like that. And I think it can be done, and you upgrade the entire three interior guys all at once. But it's going to be interesting. And Tony asked the question, what's the price you put on your O-line to keep your franchise QB healthy and upright? I would suggest ask the Kansas City Chiefs. They're paying boatloads for it. We're one of the few teams that doesn't. It is highly, highly important to do. So If KOC's serious about we need to fix it, he's taken one step already. He hired Keith Carter as assistant O-line coach. Now, Keith Carter has a mixed record as O-line coach, one I advocated for yesterday. And you add that along with 3 new guys, preferably, and then drafting some developmental guys, or 2 new guys, and then drafting, say, Gray Zabel at 24, something like that. I think you are going to see a better product to keep JJ upright and an improved run game. And we need both.
So let's kind of break down the comment from Tony, because I think there's a misconception here. Dollars does not mean better. And I think you can actually point to the Kansas City Chiefs. But they gave Jawan Taylor $20 million a year. And we played awful at right tackle at the end of the year. I think, and especially when it comes to the offensive line, I think he can really point to the end of the season with Sam Darnold. How much of that was on Sam Darnold and how much of that was on the offensive line? And I think there's this disconnect where, like, the offensive line was asked to play at a stupid high level. They were second in ESPN's pass block win rate metric, which measures blocks that are sustained for 2.5 or more seconds. Darnold held the ball longer than everybody except, I believe it was Lamar Jackson and Jalen Hurts. Guess who are scramblers? That factors in too. JJ McCarthy, theoretically, based on his college tape and based on kind of what Kevin O'Connell wants to do, I would project that his time to throw is going to go down from Sam Darnold's 3.08 seconds, probably like 2.88. One of the big things with pressures, and I know when it comes to like Pro Football Focus, and I think they do a really good job of some aspects, I hate their O-line grades, and I don't think anybody's going to convince me otherwise. But the pressure metric, and this is one thing where I wish it was broken down a little more. Maybe it is with some of their more premium features that aren't as public facing. One of the big things with pressures, they aren't all created equal. Not every pressure is the same. If Bradbury allows 5 pressures in a game and 4 of them are after 5 seconds, I don't care. You shouldn't be asking your offensive line to block for 5 seconds. That's way too long. That's what's the right phrasing for it? It's asking them to do too much. It's unrealistic expectations. So when I take a look at Bradbury, he's bang average. And there's one aspect of this that I think that we forget, Dave. There's chemistry with Bradbury and calling the offensive line protections. There is a value to what Bradbury has that a new guy coming in will not have.
Yeah, but it doesn't say the new guy can't develop it.
Nope. I'm not saying that either. I'm just saying that there's a value for already having it and not having to learn it. There's a value to being able to do it without having to think twice, where it's just second nature, because he's been in a Kevin O'Connell offense for 3 seasons, because he's already worked with JJ McCarthy. He's already worked with Darrison O'Neal and Brandel. And if you keep Ingram for this exercise, just say Ingram, because he's still on the roster and Dalton Reiser's not. He's already worked with all of those guys. You're going to bring in other pieces and stuff, but center's a harder position to replace than it would right guard. All of this to say, if you want to replace him, I'm not going to tell you that you're wrong. I'm just saying nobody has offered me a suitable replacement that makes sense from a dollars and cents standpoint and a talent standpoint. Because, well, you make a good point, Dave, that the salary cap's going up. Wasted money is still wasted money. If you're going to, like, let's say Drew Dahlman, he gives you $10 million a year play, but you're paying him 18, you're still massively overpaying. And that's just a theoretical number to just prove what I'm trying to say. I think Garrett Bradbury gives you a $6 million player. Now, you're going to have flaws with a $6 million player, But now all that money is still going to go to other assets. And while we have the money, you still should be smart in how you spend it. And I just don't see upgrading in this center market being a smart move right now. Now, guard is a different story. I think you can get 2 good guards. And Tony makes a good point. He only has 1 year left on his contract. I'm not saying even extend him. He has 1 year left on his contract. Let it run out. And then you can push center off to next year. Because guess what? If you improve both guard spots and get Christian Darrisaw back, because Christian Darrisaw being out was about half of the issues on the offensive line last year. It was amazing how much things fell off when Darrisaw went down. So that plays into it.
But if you want to use the cost analogy, here's where it's flawed. You can keep Brandel and Ingram. Ingram's going to make, what, $3 million or whatever? Brandel's up right around there, too. Something like that. And you've got an offensive line that last year for a while was number 1 in the business. But you know they have problem with big guys rushing up the middle. And you just live with it. You're saving money. Now, do you want to do that, though?
I mean, ideally, you want that to be fixed tenfold.
Right.
That's the ideal scenario. But we also have to look at things from a realism perspective, where if let's say you improve both guard spots, you're fine at center. It's not great. You want an improvement. You want to find out. But if you improve both your guard spots, or at least fix right guard and bring in competition for Brandel, because I think Brandel's fine next to Christian Darrisaw. I do. The splits with and without him are so incredibly different. It's bonkers. But you can't always fix everything. And you know what? With the other holes on the team, I think center needs to be lower on the list, because you improve both guard spots and boom, now you fix secondary, the interior of the defensive line. As far as a pass rush perspective, they don't need to fix the run game. That's great. You bring back Jonathan Bullard and you keep Jalen Redmond there, you have an elite run stopping group. It's about generating a pass rush that the Vikings have the problem with, which how much are they going to be willing to sacrifice in the run game to be able to get that kind of pass rush? Because you're not taking a guy who's a third down pass rusher in round 1. You need that guy to be able to play the run. And that is what's difficult about running a 3-4. You have to have a guy who can play the run. Finding that guy is hard. Just look at Pittsburgh Steelers. They were lucky to have 2 of them at the same time. Cam Hayward, Stephon Tuitt. Then you just get a big nose tackle, and they were like unbeatable in the trenches for a while. But it's hard to find that guy. Like, there's so many different areas, and we're going to have a lot more free agency stuff coming up on Wednesday, Dave, because there's going to be a lot of fun stuff. But I just think the Garrett Bradbury thing is mainly because fans are pissed off about that he's had the same struggles for so long. I just think it's so low on the priority list compared to everything else, paired with the lack of quality options. Because some are sold on Drew Dahlman. I'm not. Like, if Drew Dahlman was in a Creed Humphrey package, yep. But you're bringing in the same archetype and who's maybe just slightly better. That worries me. What happens if he stinks just like Bradbury and now you're paying him a bunch of money? That worries me. It worries me a lot.
Kwesi's butt's on the line either way.
Well, I think kind of based on the reporting I've seen, Kwesi is probably just getting that extension around the draft, and it's probably not going to even be a worrisome thing. Kwesi's a patient guy. He lets things play out. He doesn't force it. Like, I think Kwesi has been much more maligned than he should be, fair or foul. I just find it really interesting. Jonathan Bullard is great. He's just only a run defender. He's not a pass rusher. He's going to move the pocket. He's going to be a great run defender. That is an awesome thing to have for $2 million. I would give that guy 4. He was so good against the run last year. So good. Let's see if we can get a couple other questions, and then we'll kind of get into
answer Anthony. He says, get Levi Onwuzurike in free agency, and he plays nose tackle and D tackle. I'm hearing Levi is going to get tagged by Cowgirls.
No. That is Oso Digizua.
Okay. Sorry.
He's getting tagged by the Cowboys.
Hard names to pronounce wrong.
Levi Onwuzurike is defensive tackle with the Detroit Lions, who, I'm going to be honest, I really like Levi Onwuzurike. He rocks. But he also has a problem staying healthy. So that's a really interesting kind of thing to kind of pair together. Here, let's get to this from Fignuts35, because we spent like 20 minutes on the Bradbury thing, which I think is good, because I think it's an interesting thing to parse out and really dive into, because everybody just wants him replaced. But wanting somebody replaced versus finding the solution, they're different things, and I think it's important to talk it out. Fignuts asks, do you think we'll be able to tag and trade Darnold? What happens if the Vikings want to trade down the draft, but cannot get appropriate value? At this point, I don't think a tag and trade is happening. There are multiple schools of thought, and I'm going to give you what I believe to be the more realistic school of thought. There's this idea where I call it Madden brain, because there's so many people who can just do this on Madden, where, oh, I tagged him, I traded him, no problem. I got this great offer. If you tag him and you can't trade him, you are screwed in free agency. Your plans are kaput. The Vikings want to bring him back, but do they want to pay him $40? No, I really don't think they do. I think they have a number in mind. Now, the number for Kirk was 2 for $78, I think, which was like 39. That was the offer that they gave him going into free agency last year. That's still a sizable amount of money. He said no. He got $45 a year from the Atlanta Falcons, who probably will cut him. It's a tough one, because if money weren't involved, Sam Darnold's quarterback next year, no questions. But this is a salary cap league. This is not Major League Baseball. And even if teams want to sign him, who's going to give you the draft capital? I firmly believe they were going to go into this with an open mind, have conversations, and try to find an answer to their tag and trade conundrum. If they do it, who's going to make the trade? I don't think they got a good enough answer, because otherwise I think he'd be tagged by now. And they have until 3 p.m. tomorrow to make that. It's not as easy as, hey, I can do it on Madden. And I think that's where a lot of our brains go to. Mine goes there too sometimes. But you have to have a willing partner, and they have to give you more than a comp third next year. If you're not getting that, what the hell's the point? You're giving yourself all this headache. Plus, there's a PR side to this too, from a player perspective. Franchise tags are very anti-player. So you have to weigh the cost-benefit analysis with that. And that's not something that you and I can do. We can't sit here and say, oh, the players think this, and all of a sudden players aren't going to want to come play here. Well, one, the Vikings, in the 3 years of that NFLPA player survey, Vikings finished first, second, and second, with great ownership, great front office, great coaching, great training staff, and nobody in the NFL treats families of players better than the Minnesota Vikings. That's a great thing to have. But you can ruin it by doing things that are anti-player, like the franchise tag. So you have to be careful. I kind of related to wrestling, because one of the big things was, like, Tony Khan, when he started AEW, we're never going to cut people. We're going to let contracts expire. If you come to me and ask for your release, I may grant it. But we're not going to do the WWE thing where we're just going to have rounds of cuts multiple times a year. And then he had a round of cuts. And all that goodwill that he built up was shattered in an instant because he cut like 6 people. Now, that kind of thing can happen with a franchise. Like, oh, they take care of us. They do all this. Well, this guy came in and say, hey, you play, then you go get paid elsewhere. But then you're tagging me? So now you're kind of going against everything that you've told the player and everything that you've been as an organization. So you have to play the PR game too. How much does that matter? I can't tell you. But it's going to matter at some point to someone, and that can make a really big impact on the future of your franchise. So you have to be careful there. And I think the Vikings have just not gotten the information they wanted for a potential tag and trade possibility, and they're going to let him enter free agency, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and people don't realize it takes 3 entities to agree to it.
Mm-hmm.
It takes the Vikings, obviously. It takes Team A, who they're trading to agree and give up that 3rd rounder or better. And it takes Sam Darnold himself agreeing to it. Because if he doesn't, Sam Darnold could say, you can tag me, I'm not signing it. And then that just under 41 million or whatever it is, sits there and has to be accounted for until he's gone. And that amount of money gets us our 2 guards and a center or a defensive lineman. And you're tying it up because that goes to this year's cap. There's no playing with that money. And it takes Sam, it basically gives Sam a veto on top of the whole it's anti-player thing. It's a bad choice. Now, do you think they asked around and say, hey, Steelers, you want to trade? Raiders, you want to trade? Titans, you want to trade? I'm sure all that was discussed. But if Sam says, no, I'm not going with it, I'm not playing, let him walk.
Mm-hmm.
It's not as easy as people think.
No. It's tough.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard. But you know what? This whole thing is hard. It's tough.
Cincinnati announced they're tagging their wide receiver today for the second
You know
time.
what's funny about that? T. Higgins announced it, not even the organization or the insiders. T. Higgins, like, tag, period.
Uh-huh.
So I had fun. I quote tweeted. I'm like, does that mean I'm it?
No, but do you think people want to play for Cincinnati? Players? Is that a destination?
The only reason why it's a destination is you play with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase.
That's it.
That's it. They have 3 scouts, like infamously. They have like 3 scouts. The GM is the owner because it's like his pet project. And yeah, it's no bueno. Tony mentioned like the only place that the Vikings were bad is in the cafeteria. Close. The facilities were good. It was the nutrition and dietitian team, which they were 19th in the league with a B+.
What a B+. Mm-hmm.
A B+.
I heard a breakdown. Right. It wasn't enough variety. It's like, have you been there? Have you heard what they serve? There's a ton of variety or freshness. And I joked about, they don't get fresh seafood because they're Minnesota.
I think it was more how the nutrition dietitian team wasn't it?
Okay.
Versus it could like be. Because I think the nutrition and dietitian versus the eating facilities are 2 different categories.
Mm-hmm. But I can guarantee you it's going to be improved this year. Mm-hmm. That's the way the Wilfs work. For the Wilfs, it's their Super Bowl type deal. It's one of those when they're at the owners meeting.
Well, one of their 2 Super Bowls, they still want the Lombardi.
Oh, absolutely. But when they can go, hey, report card.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's get to some of the things from the combine because I want to talk about some prospects, and we'll get to that. But I think the article from Alec Lewis, what he heard at the NFL Scouting Combine, is very interesting because there were some really interesting things, and he kind of revealed that the Vikings broke the rules, Dave. And what's really interesting? Yes and no. yes and no. They absolutely broke the rules, but it also really doesn't matter. And this is the line, as Dave has up there. Trey Smith intrigued the Vikings, and Minnesota's brass met with Smith's representatives in Indianapolis. Didn't take much digging, however, for the Vikings to know that Smith would remain in Kansas City as they franchise tagged him. This is one of those really weird ones. You can't talk to other players' representatives. You just can't. The Vikings did, and it's reported. But here's the thing. Nobody's going to call him on it, Dave. You know why?
Why?
Everybody does it. Right. Everybody. So it's one of those things where it's against the rules, but if you call them on it, like if the Lions called out the Vikings, or if the Vikings called out like the 49ers, you're all hypocrites. They only call out ones where it does not normally happen, like the Kirk Cousins thing from last year, where he explicitly said that the team doctor called him during the period where you weren't supposed to talk to the player. That is where things can get murky. But nobody's going to call you out for it at the combine because everybody does it.
Well, my question is, Trey Smith's representation is Priority Sports and Entertainment. That's the agency that covers him. I tried to look to see if the Vikings have players that belong to that group. It's one of the largest agency groups out there, and they cover all teams. And you can't get a hold publicly of those lists. Agents can, but we can't. They could be saying, hey, yeah, we met with their agents because we have... I was going to give Harrison Smith, but Harrison Smith belongs to a different group. Byron Murphy belongs to the same group. And we're talking about his extension. So we talked to his agent, and his agent may be the same agent as Trey Smith. That's their defense, generally.
Oh, sure.
And it could be what Alec heard.
But the fact that it was just like, and this is no shade on Alec. Alec's a good reporter.
Alec is outstanding.
He's a good dude. Mm-hmm. But he just flat out said that they met with Trey Smith's representation, not even saying, hey, it was an offhand conversation because Byron Murphy shares an agent. None of that. It was just they had talks, which in essence, based on how the NFL rules are in, it's tampering. So I just found that part very interesting how it was framed. Quite frankly, I don't care. I really don't care that they had these conversations. They should, because everybody does. But the fact that it was reported that way, to me, is just fascinating. Because it wasn't like, with the whole Kirk Cousins thing, because they would talk to Kirk Cousins' agent, Mike McCarthy, every year. Well, then they would say, Kirk Cousins shares an agent with this player. None of that was done here. And I just found that very, 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 very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think anything will come of it, but just the framing of it. Just really weird. But let's continue on. It's good that they were trying. We got that from Ben Gessling when he did, I think it was K-Fan around the Super Bowl, where he said, yeah, they want to try and go for Trey Smith. So good that they are serious about it, but feels like they're being selective. And Alec mentions Will Fries.
Mm-hmm.
And it is pronounced Fries,
not Freeze.
I when I was in Mobile, I was staying with our Colts beat writer Destin at the Airbnb. He corrected me. He's like, nope, it's Fries. You can call him Fries. I'm like, cool. I got a buddy in the industry, and we know him, Matt Freeze,
mm-hmm.
of the Kindred Skulls podcast. So it is Fries. Good player, broke his tibia a few weeks into the year. What does that mean for his market? Is he going to want to take a multi-year deal, or is he going to want to do a 1-year prove it so then he can cash in next year? Who knows? I think everything is going to course correct itself on guard this year, Dave, for the sole fact that I think they overpaid last year. Like teams in general. Like the Rams already trying to get out of Jonah Jackson's contract. And be honest, I'm a little warmer on it than I was at the time because when I was on my flight back, I actually wrote that the Vikings shouldn't get Jonah Jackson. They should just ignore it because he's just not a scheme fit and he does not have good enough foot speed, which is why I'm completely out on Alabama's Tyler Booker. Don't mock Tyler Booker to the Vikings. Bad fit. Now, will the Vikings want to go to more of a gap style approach? Maybe. But if you can equate anything from Kevin O'Connell to Sean McVay, I just don't think that's going to happen. McVay brought in more power style interior guys for pass protection and then just ran zone stuff. He just kept doing the same thing. They going into that Eagles playoff game, they had pulled offensive linemen a total, Dave, in the entire season of 10 times. 10. Not 100. Not 50. 10. Less than one pulling offensive lineman per game. That's bonkers. Even zone teams run counter, which has 2 pullers normally. Just wild. I love the idea of getting better pass protectors, but you can't sacrifice the run game. And having a guy that just doesn't fit what you want to do in the run game, to me, does not make sense. So that's why I think Tyler Booker's a big fat no. But maybe they'll prove me wrong. And if they do, I'll eat crow on it. It's fine.
He did not have a good combine.
He was never going to have a good combine. He can't move. He's a phone booth guy. But you know what? When he's in a phone booth, Dave, he's going to kick your ass. Put him on the Ravens. Let the Ravens have him. He's just like a perfect Ravens guard because he doesn't have to move. It's great. So a couple other things that were of note in Lewis's piece. There is, I don't know if it was in here or not, but Daniel Jones potentially going to a team like the Indianapolis Colts. The Vikings do want to sign Byron Murphy, and they want to bring back Bynum, but they're not. It doesn't sound like they're willing to pay him buku bucks. Let me find the.
Well, you look that up. I'm going to answer Bill Walker's deal. He said you say $18 million for Dahlman. That's crazy. Dahlman's figured 11 to 12 and a half is what most places have him at.
I will say the reason why I gave 18 is one, that's what Creed Humphrey's getting.
I've heard it before.
Yeah. There was reporting that say because he's the top center that he could get up to that kind of number. Look, if it's like 11 or 12 million, I'm a lot more warm on it. I'm still not convinced it's worth doubling the center position salary for the marginal improvement you'll get. But that's my opinion, and it's okay to disagree with that. But it wouldn't shock me if he gets closer to the 18 because the center market is thin in free agency. If you want one, you better pay. And that's how guys like Dahlman get $18 million. So we'll see what ends up happening there. But the Cam Bynum thing, Alec had a really interesting piece. And I kind of knew this in the back of my head, but it's just different when you see it on paper. 6 safeties make 15 million or more. Antoine Winfield Jr., Derwin James, Minkah Fitzpatrick, Budda Baker, Xavier McKinney, and Jesse Bates. Cam Bynum is not one of those players. So with that in mind, how much do you want to give Cam Bynum? And that's not to be insulting to Cam Bynum. He's a very good football player. How much you want to give just a very good football player who's not an elite level athlete, who's not a difference maker from an athletic perspective, because those are the guys you give those buku bucks to, Dave. Are the Vikings going to be willing to do that? Not convinced. So it'll be interesting to see what his market ends up being. I've been on record multiple times saying about 12 to 13 million a year. I think it stays in that realm. I really do. Because he's a very cerebral, smart safety with capable enough athleticism. He doesn't have great athleticism. And if you have great athleticism, you can be that difference maker, which is why I think they may want to target Javon Holland. Can play in the slot. He can play over the top. Great center fielder. Great range. So center would be interesting. Especially because...
Speaking of safety, there's that one talking about the combine. That's what, 6'2", 230, something like that, and flies.
6'3", 220. Nick Emanwari from South Carolina. Oh, buddy. Is he good at football? He is good. This is like, think of if Kyle Hamilton was a really good athlete, that's kind of the archetype that you're getting. Emanwari's got great ball skills. He had 3 touchdowns last year. One of them got called back due to penalty that didn't impact the interception nor the return. But he did have 2 official ones. He's got great ball skills. He's got really good instincts. He's patient. He needs to be a little bit better in attacking in the run game. He's aggressive, but he needs to fit better. He needs to be able to tackle better as well. These all factor in. And he's really good. I actually have a mock draft coming out tomorrow, and it gives the Vikings Emanwari at 24 overall. I love him. He's awesome. But he's one of those guys that you knew he was a freaky athlete. He didn't really show you anything that you didn't already know. So I think that's an interesting one. Couple more things. I want to talk a couple other things. He got feedback on Dallas Turner, where one NFC evaluator saying, hey, I don't have any worries about him. Kind of related him to Nolan Smith, who had like 11 sacks over the course of the entire season. Dallas Turner's 21 years old. He needed a year. Plus, he was behind an all-pro. That's why he didn't play. I'm not worried about him at all, and I don't think you should be either. He showed real signs of improvement over the course of the year. It was great. It was great. But couple other things. Team sources, Jalen Redmond, Levi Drake Rodriguez, Mekhi Blackman, Dwight McGlothern, and Jay Ward all have arrows angled upward, so upward trajectories. Durante Jones probably going to get a defensive coordinator job somewhere soon because he's just getting a lot of praise. And they're going to try and get more draft picks. How? I don't know. But they're trying to find ways to generate more picks.
And hopefully the NFL doesn't go, you lose one because you tampered.
They won't. It's still interesting that Alec wrote it and framed it that way.
To me. That's why I said I started looking up who's his agent. Are there any Vikings that share that agent, especially any that are going to be free agents?
Yeah. Yeah. All right. A couple other tidbits here to discuss. Combine. Biggest thing from the combine is you don't want to botch it. Blowing it will do the most for your draft stock. Now, when it should not do that much for your draft stock, but seeing it in person can really impact things. So Kenneth Grant didn't run because he tweaked his hamstring. That could be good for the Vikings because maybe then he'll fall because he's just a freaky type athlete. Absolutely freaky. I would love to have Kenneth Grant on this team. Then you could get Harrison Smith away from nose tackle and put him at 4I. I would love that. He's a capable nose, but I don't prefer him in nose tackle. The quarterbacks, I thought Jalen Milroe looked improved. We don't really need to worry about quarterback, but Jackson Dart is a psyop. That is not a first-round player. Don't let anybody tell you he is. No. Jackson Dart, no. I won't believe it. No.
Well, how many quarterbacks did the Vikings interview?
So far, we just have Cam Ward that I know of.
And we suspect Shedeur Sanders because he had the Vikings hat.
Yeah. But I haven't seen it officially reported. So I'm
just educated speculation. But we know how KOC loves to gather his quarterbacks and stroke them and collect them. And
100%. I think the interviewing Cam Ward is interesting. I think it tells you three things. One, KOC is a quarterback nerd and he just wants to talk to all the quarterbacks. Two, you never know what's going to happen years down the line. So getting to know people now is always a good thing. And three, there's also the element of finding out about teammates. Maybe he wants to know about Kyle Williams from Washington State, which please, Kyle Williams rocks. Maybe he wants to know about his Miami teammates, tight end Elijah Arroyo, wide receivers Jacoby George, Sam Brown, and Xavier Restrepo, running back Damian Martinez, offensive lineman Jalen Rivers. I'm going to have articles coming out kind of talking about how visits have mattered with this regime. So far, the Vikings have drafted 5 players that have taken a top 30. Last year, now I'm not including the quarterbacks. None of the quarterbacks took a top 30. The Vikings traveled to them. Because here's the thing with the top 30 visit. You can't work out in the facility. It's only a visit. It's like going to an open house for a property you want to buy. You get to walk in, you get to look around, you get to answer and ask questions. But you can't like cook a meal on the stove. Can't do any of that. You can't, on a top 30 visit, you cannot work out. So I thought that was interesting. But yeah, the Vikings traveled to all the quarterbacks. They could do a private workout. They could have lunch with them. And I thought that was very, very cool that they did that. But yeah, they've drafted 5 players on top 30 visits across 3 drafts, which have yielded 22 picks. So almost 20%. That's not nothing. It's not nothing.
Yeah, but I think it's gone down over the years.
I'm just talking the Kwesi,
yeah.
Just the Kwesi regime. It was 2, 2, and 1 as far as the splits. Plus, I can actually pull it up right now because I have the articles in my bookmarks.
We used to track, it used to be a higher number. We used to track where they were visited, Senior Bowl, etc., where they brought up on a visit, where they did the team go to them. And it used to be a higher percentage off that list because I used to keep those lists, especially during draft days. And I would say, and I'd place them, which rounds they go off. And I'd look, hey, expect this year, right? When we get in the draft, and it's gotten less and less relevant, but it's still relevant.
So this is just the first 2 years because I wrote it right before the draft last year. I was wrong. It was 1 in 22. 3 of the 6 picks in 2023 were top 30 visits. And then also they made 5 of the 6 picks that they made were also top 30 adjacent in 2023. So they drafted Jordan Addison, Mekhi Blackman, Dwayne McBride were all top 30 visits. Jay Ward and Jaquelin Roy were adjacent because they had 2 of their teammates in. So that's something that the Vikings have done too, where they've drafted 3 players that were adjacent because they had Kirby Joseph in the safety from Illinois. In 22, they drafted Vidarian Lowe. They've also brought in multiple UDFAs from those visits, 5 of them in the first 2 years. So they really do use these visits a lot. And I think it's going to be really interesting to kind of track that. But the big thing from the combine is this. It matters, but it also doesn't. It's the information coming out that matters the most. And we're going to have a lot more draft stuff. We're going to have a lot more free agency stuff. Man, I love football season, but these few weeks, like from now and through the NFL draft, are probably my favorite of football calendar. I love this. It's so much fun. It's fun to kind of build and think and project. And we're going to do a lot more of that. That is our show for tonight. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Tomorrow night, I believe Sal has a new episode of Scolders and Spice. We will be back on Wednesday. And hopefully this week we start doing some draft content. just draft specific content. SKOL Search is returning. We're going to have a lot of fun with that. Two Old Bloggers back on Sundays because Darren is finally here or something. I don't know. But you're going to want to make sure that you have it in your calendar Sundays, or do the simple thing. Subscribe and ring the bell to get notifications. You'll get a notification that, hey, half hour until the show starts. Hey, the show is starting right now. Mm-hmm. If you can't watch it live, that's okay. Watch it later.
Darren was back yesterday. It's a good show.
About time. And with that, I'm Tyler. He's Dave. Thank you so much for listening or watching. SKOL Vikings.
SKOL Vikings. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell to get notifications. It helps us grow this community that we all love, our Minnesota Vikings. And on behalf of Tyler Forness and myself, Dave Stefano, thank you so dearly for watching The Real Forno Show. SKOL, everyone.